Hey guys, welcome back from Classic Work. I've had quite a few people request that I do this video on what's my take on engine-driven welders, which ones are the best, which ones to stay away from, that kind of stuff. And I guess we'll just hop into it and tell you what I recommend and what I don't recommend, I guess. So if you're new to the channel, I've got about, 12 years welding experience now. That sounds about right. I've got, 3,000 or 4,000 hours under the hood. So I've welded with quite a few engine welders. I've been in the field for quite some time now. I was a little reluctant to do this video because I didn't think that I had near the experience as some other folks out there, but I've been around a fair amount to give my point of view. So basically, in my opinion, there's 4 classes of engine-driven welder. You have wannabe welders, you have lawnmower welders, you have pipeliners, and then you have industrial machines. Your wannabe welders are like your Miller Wildcat, your Hobart 175s, your E2 Roughnecks, your Lincoln Weld-A-Powers. Basically, they are a one-cylinder engine that runs a generator that can weld, basically. The second category is your lawnmower welders. If they sound like this, it's a lawnmower welder. So basically these are your Bobcat 225s, Bobcat 250s, Ranger 8s, Ranger 10s, GTX 250s, 302 Miller Trailblazers, stuff like that. They're all, in my opinion, lawnmower welders. Your third class is your pipeliners. These are your SA200s, SA250s, SAE 300s, the Miller Big 20s and the Big 40s, and bigger industrial machines. And then your last class, your 4th class, is the industrial machines. These are your SAM 500s and 600s, your Big Blues, the Vantage 400s, all them. Those are industrial size machines. So it depends on where you fall in that category of what machine that you're going to pick, basically. So if you're only doing like small part-time job stuff and you need a lot of portability, then you want to go with like a lawnmower welder, where it's like a Bobcat 250 or a Ranger 8 or Ranger 10 or something like that. If you're doing more industrial work and you want something that can do a lot of heavy carbon gouging, then you may want a bigger machine like a SAM 400 or 600. So basically, what do I recommend and what don't I recommend? I guess we can start with some of the best machines that I've ran. Well, let's just we'll start with the lowest one, the wannabe welders. Probably the best small welder that I've ever ran was actually a Miller Wildcat. Those actually have pretty good arc stability. They've got a decent generating capacity on them. They ran like they were supposed to. I would say they did pretty well, considering. The worst machine that I've ever ran in that category, well, the worst one by far, was a John Deere air compressor that had a generator package on it. That was probably the worst engine-driven welder that I've ever used. It was a joke. Probably second in there would be, I ran a Hobart 175. That was, it welded, I'll say that, but it was one of the worst arc stabilities I think I'd ever seen. The fluctuation of the wave, you could actually see it in the puddle. The puddle would grow and then it would shrink, and it would grow and it would shrink, and it was really bad. So out of that class, I would definitely say the Wildcat was probably the best. Going to the next size up, the lawnmower welders, stay away from any 2-cylinder welder with an Onan on it. I have never seen an Onan that would survive. They all drink oil, and they will throw a rod out the side of them. I can't tell you how many welders I've seen in a junkyard that had an Onan engine on. They do not perform well. You have to baby them. You have to keep an eye on them. They jump. I'm sorry. I hate if you got one, but that's just the way they are. Let me know in the comments if you ever had one that you had good luck with it, because I would love to hear about it. Your best machines in that range, Miller, the 250 Bobcat is actually pretty fair. Get one with a coater on it, and they hold up decently well. They're a versatile machine. You can run stick TIG, a little bit of carbon gouging, not much. They just don't have the capacity to run full-blown carbon gouge. But for a basic repair machine where you're going to run stick or you're going to run a little bit of suitcase welder, they work fine. The biggest problem I have with the lawnmower welders is they lie about their capacity. So most of them, they have a 220 plug, like a 50 amp plug. They will not run 50 amps on that plug. It'll lug the engine down and it'll get somewhere around 40 amps on it, and it'll trip the breaker every time. It's too much for them. They're non-industrial machines. They can't sit there and produce good, clean electricity. I know the Bobcats for certain can't do it. I'm pretty sure the Rangers can't do it either. So that's one big flaw, I would say. They have pretty large generating capacity, like 10,000 watt, but I mean, and don't get me wrong, they can run a refrigerator, and they can run a grinder, and they can run things that don't have to have brushes in them in order to work. But the generating capacity is a little bit lied about what they can actually do. So the engines are just not strong enough. The pipeliner machines, most of the pipeliner machines that I've ever ran have been very solid. Like the SA200. I think that's probably it used to be the most talked about welder that was ever built. They're iconic. They have one of the best sounds in the world. They have one of the most stable arcs out there. They ran good for a long time. And the biggest problem that I have with the SA200 is it's just like everything else. You know, when you hear like the 5.9 Cummins, or you hear about, you know, the John Deere 4020, their reputation has made them too swole for their own britches, if you know what I'm saying. People talk about how great they are. I ran an SA200 for 5 years. Don't get me wrong, great stick machine, great stick machine. They suck in every other way other than being a good stick welder. So they drink the hell out of some gas. They have no generating capacity, and you can't run certain tools on them because they were a DC generator only. So to give you, for instance, I had a job one time running my old SA200 that I had to drill some holes in some concrete with a hammer drill. I had to drill like 11 holes. Wasn't a big thing. I didn't think nothing about it. Plugged my drill in there, started drilling. I got to hole number 6. I went to hit the trigger, heard the engine rev up, and then nothing happened. And what had happened was, I didn't know this, that the tool, if it has what's known as a potentiometer in it, which is a device that allows you, just to give you an idea, that as you pull the trigger slowly, it gives more or less power, and it cuts back on the voltage on it. Well, it has very precise little microchips in there that regulate the voltage on it. Well, the problem is, having DC power go through it, you cannot You cannot rectify DC in the computer chips because they can't take that kind of voltage, and it'll blow them up basically. So I burnt the trigger in my my hammer drill, but I wound up getting another trigger for it and I fixed it. But the point is that I was doing a job and I had to wait a couple of days to get a part just to finish drilling 7 holes. So yeah, you'll run into that. But going back to the SA200. The SA200, in my opinion, is a good machine. Is it as great as everybody talks about? No, it is not. I will say it has the toughest flathead engine of all time, which is the Red Seal Continental. My machine, I ran it completely out of water one time. I think the hose going to the water pump, the clamp got loose on it. It leaked every drop of water out of it. I cut the machine off, or tried to, and it sat there and dieseled. It hit on one cylinder for 15 minutes straight. It would not die. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was like, man, something's bad wrong here. It finally died. I think it was around lunchtime. I went, ate lunch, and I came back and started checking stuff and everything. And I opened up that radiator top and it was bone dry in there. And I remember I had to get done with the job, and the engine had cooled off enough. And there was a cattle trough that was not far from the truck. Man, I went over there and got some of that old dirty murky water and I poured it in that radiator. I bet I had a little 1 gallon container, and I think I poured like 5 or 6 of those in there. But guess what? It cranked back up. It sounded a little tight for about a month or so. I probably scored the heck out of the cylinders, but it got over it. And when I got home, I drained that old nasty water out of it and put coolant back in it. Funny thing about it was it never leaked after that, ever again. I didn't tighten any clamps up or nothing. It just kind of went away. So you'll run into funny stuff. But yeah, SA200, still one of my favorite machines I've ever ran, but by far is not the best machine that's out there. I run an SA250 now, and it is, in my opinion, superior to the SA200. More fuel efficient, more reliable, just all around better machine. And the only thing that I can diss the SA250 for is they're loud and they shake. You know, it's a 3-cylinder engine on them. They're always going to be a little out of balance. And if you don't have it on a heavy enough truck, it'll shake your truck to pieces. And them being loud, they did not put a big enough exhaust system on them. It's a little muffler about that tall, and they are loud as sin. They really are. But they're tough welders. I had one thrown off of the back of the truck, landed on solid pavement, and it didn't miss a lick. A lot of welders can't say that. Some of the other pipeliners that I would say stay away from is actually the Vantages. The Vantage 300, the Vantage 400, the 450s. I have seen tons of those machines with computer board problems. The engines will run great and no weld, sometimes no power. And the boards on them things are nowadays probably over $3,000 to replace them. And you'll have to get somebody that knows what they're doing to do all that. But yeah, I've seen tons of Vantages in the junkyard from that. So don't get me wrong, one of the smoothest arcs I ever seen was off of Vantage 400. One of the most beautiful TIG jobs I think I ever witnessed in my own life. It came from a Vantage 400, but they're just not reliable. And here's the problem, is you don't know if it'll happen at 800 hours or 7,000 hours. There's no way to tell. They go out whenever they feel like it. So low hour machine doesn't always mean that, you know, it's in good shape. So yeah. Anyways, well, I guess I skipped on into the industrial machines. So your industrial machines are, like I said, your SAM 400s and 600s and your bigger Vantages and stuff like that. Those type of machines I have done very little work around. The big thing with them is they can do huge carbon gouge work where you can run 1/2-inch rod, you can run a 1-inch wide rod. I mean, and most of them have air packs on them and stuff like that, so they're very industrial machines. They have a lot can go wrong. They have 3-phase output. They have, you know, over 20,000 watt generating capacity. It's a lot to those machines. I've seen them with lots and lots of hours on them. I don't know exactly if they were just being run as power units or what, but they, other than the advantages, I haven't dealt with them all that much. So I can't tell you in all honesty, you know, how good they are and how good they aren't. I know the older SAM machines, some of them, the lowest they would go on your amperage was 100 amps. That was the lowest setting. So you can't run 332 rods with them. You can't do real low amperage work. So, I mean, they good for carbon gouging where you need lots of amperage and everything, but they can't go past a certain limit. Now, the newer machines can. They can go all the way down to 2 amps or however low it's got to go, which you're never going to use anything for 2 amps. But, yeah, that's just my take on some of the better machines out there and some of them that are not. If you're going to buy a Bobcat, the 250s are pretty decent. They're better than the 225s are. They're a little bit heavier, got a little bit better parts on them. I'm not a huge fan of lawnmower welders. I've welded with industrial machines so long, I'm used to the arc. And these machines, most of them run inverters. This one's not an inverter machine, I don't think. I think it's still a transformer machine. But the inverter machines, they have a much different arc than, say, the old transformer machines, and it's all personal preference. The inverters run just fine, there's nothing wrong with them, but you get used to something you don't like to change, if you know what I mean. But the Bobcat 250s are not bad, just kind of the heavier versions of like the Ranger 8. The Ranger 10 is a little bit heavier than the Ranger 8. So they're all the same thing, basically, you know, just different colors. I will say this, if you want a good stick TIG rig, the best ones are Lincoln. I hate to say that, but it's true. If you want a good wire feeder machine, I hate to say it, Miller is a better wire feeder runner, in my opinion. But it's all on what you get used to and what you actually like. But yeah, I would say that out of the lawnmower class welders, the Bobcat 225 is one of the better machines. Like I said, being a little heavier does wonders for it. Of course, these are SA200s. This is Urza. This is the one that I ran for 5 years. And this is my uncle's machine over here. They're great machines. Couple of things that's not great about them is they are hard on gas. It's one of the only machines I've ever seen that would not make it through a day's worth of work without having to put gas in them if you ran over, say, 7 or 8 hours. Very tough machines. You can get them in both configurations of either mag or distributor, which was nice. And yeah, one of the best stable arcs they had out there. They ran very low RPM, like 1500 RPM on a DC generator, and had big industrial parts in them. One of the biggest complaints I have with the SA200 is when they sit, of course no welder does well when they sit, but they are some of the hardest starting backup machines out there. I don't know what the deal is, but you got to have a good hot battery in them. You got to have very clean gas in them. The gas tanks are known to rust out on them very quickly, and they don't sit well. They really don't. They ticky. They bad ticky. The Red Cell Continental is a very ticky engine. But you may see this welder over here too. Sadly, I'm not old enough to have run one of the original Hobarts, but these were pretty good welders back in the day. I've heard from other people, but I have no experience with them other than owning one. I've never actually tried to get this one running. Probably need to. It'd be a cool video. But yeah, I got one of every flavor out here. This machine back here is my Big 40. I don't know why, that is one of the most asked about welders that I've got. I don't understand it. The Big 40 basically was Miller's attempt to copy the SA200 basically. And it had some good things about it. It has an AC generator on it, which allowed you to run things like a refrigerator and a microwave and stuff that didn't have brushes in it like the DC generators of the SA200s. But I mean, they had the same engine, Red Seal Continental. That one there happens to be the distributor version. And yeah, they had DC rectifiers in it basically. Big old giant coils in there to rectify the AC to DC. I've never been a huge fan of it. It did not weld as good as the SA200 did. It'll burn a 7018 well, but that's not saying anything. Just about any machine will burn a 7018 well. 6010 cellulose rods, it did very poorly in my opinion. But I ran it some, it was okay, but it wasn't the best.